I want to try to take a step back, but I want this to be a conversation. So please feel free to interrupt me. Um, Sometimes I can talk shorter, but I get too lazy and keep on going. So, you're always welcome to interrupt. Make sure I'm answering your questions, make sure I'm clear, and that sort of thing. But since we're talking about placements, let me kind of set the stage for it. I will tell you things you probably already know, so forgive me for that. Our placements, and I'm talking about our 5-level placements, where we're talking about mid and above, early, 1 grade level below, 2 and 3 or more levels below. I like to stay in the 5 levels because they don't change throughout the year. They're the exact same thing, same cut scores all year long. So it's not anything that is adjustable. The 3 tiers have 3 different views where we swap and move cuts, and that gets to be confusing. And I'm on a campaign to get rid of those. But that's an aside. So let's start with mid, on level, or above. We group that together because in a normal setting, there's very, very few students that ever make it to late. Late is a portion, is actually the 99th percentile. In most cases in the spring, it may dip in a couple of grades and subjects down to 98. But it's still a very, very high level, usually about maybe 1.5% on average make late on level at any point in time across the district. So we group mid with it. Mid is, so when we look at placements, we looked at them from the end of the year and we defined them as such. So even though we use them all year long, it's really an end of grade type of placement and definition. So we don't adjust it through the course of the year and use different cut scores. Exact same cut score. If it's mid from our placements, it's mid from our placements. If it's late, if it's 1 grade level below, as long as they're in that range, that's 1 grade level below, whether it's fall, winter, or spring. And I have a couple of slides I'm going to share with a minute, but I wanted to make sure that we had our definitions.
Yeah.
So we define mid on level or greater as being fully or partially proficient to the chronological grade standards. Now, notice that I said chronological grade. Educators sometimes want to move it across and look at different things across placements. But when you start doing that, you lose interpretation and information because the standard setting was set to the chronological grade. So once you try to infer above it, it gets a little bit nuanced. Even our cut score of 541 for algebra readiness, you can infer some things at 7th grade, but we got some information to be able to work that through because there may be other skills and other domains the students are still struggling with, even if. So that's one thing. Early on level is defined as students who meet the minimum requirements for the chronological grade. I like to say these are students that benefit from on grade level material and even into deeper grade level material. That's where they will grow, is if they have good chronological grade material or even off grade. Mid on level students will not grow very well unless they're getting off grade level material or very deep on grade level material. They just won't. You watch your reports and you're going to see those students don't really move as much, but they also have, and some of that nuances, they also have lower growth because of their growth models, and that's to be expected. But unless they're really getting that deep information, they're just not going to grow very well. These are your brighter students, especially those ones from the fall.
Can you explain that just a little bit deeper and connect it to, is that because of the way that the scale score ranges, the width of the range affects that to get up to that late category, which is about 98th, 99th percentile that you mentioned? Are those connected?
Yes, they are. In fact, let me show you my screen.
So
So
kind
that's in
of
front of us.
So kind of back to my original question, I was asking, why so much into one. So this is hitting right on the mark for us not to misuse those cut scores in our daily, weekly, and monthly data dives that we have. So as we look at that, I knew that I was seeing an absence of late performance, and that I was inferring that is, oh, we're not doing as good a job as we should.
You're doing a beautiful job. If you don't have a late on grade level,
Yeah,
that's not a worry for me.
at the
Uh,
end of the year, at the EOY. So
Even at the EOY, I'm not that concerned about that.
yeah,
It's just a it's very, very difficult in any particular grade to, I'm going to use this as real loose, and Nate, forgive me, but to test out of a grade, essentially to be that proficient in a grade. It's very, very difficult because these standards are rich and they have a lot of depth to them. So it's very, very difficult to do that, even though what we use is indicators to help us with that, and they overlap a little bit. Yeah, that's just very difficult. It's only the top 1 or 2% of students that will ever get there at any point in time.
So can I
Uh,
ask a question?
oh, please ask.
Well, so this is what I think I hear you saying, because I do work with our gifted and talented teachers across the district.
Mm-hmm.
If we have a child who lands in that mid or above, it's nearly impossible for them to show growth throughout the year. So we shouldn't stress about if their
No,
number.
I would not say nearly impossible. I, in fact, I don't think impossible, it would be a word. What I would say is, unless those students are receiving instruction with deep DOK levels for their chronological grade and or off grade level material, which educators are sometimes reluctant. So I have a fourth grader that comes in at mid on level. And in the fall, if you could look at that fourth grade fall, that's at the 89th percentile. That is a top 2 decile student. They can grow, they do grow, they will grow. So what I'm saying is but they do not have as many holes. And so they may need information. So if you look at their domain, maybe they're late on level in numbers and operations, but early on level in geometry. So that student is going to need more information at a deep level in geometry than they will at numbers and operations. But if you're setting it up to really talk about numbers and operations without it being more at a fifth grade level or a sixth grade level, that student may not grow because they're not getting the information they need at the level they need to grow. Does that make more sense, ma'am?
So my GT teachers really need to look at those kids. And if they are truly all in that mid or above, it may be they have to start showing them some standards from the next year.
Absolutely. And if you don't, that's going to be a problem. It'll be problematic for you.
Okay.
You'll see some movement, but you definitely won't see it in the first part of the year.
Okay, perfect.
so Bob, one extension of that question, when we're throwing the word growth in there, uh, are you, when I think of the precise language behind the definition of growth, when I think about the growth model inside the metrics of iReady, the kids can still grow some and it might capture the growth, but it would be really hard for it to grow enough to change into the late
That
category.
would be a truthful statement. If
Okay,
you desire a
right,
mid-level student to grow into the late
right. So
years, we do have a measure for that. It's called stretch.
yeah, and so it's important to follow that typical growth, that stretch growth, but also possibly to monitor those scale scores and where they're at in that range
Yes,
of scores.
yes, it is.
Gotcha. Okay,
Yes, it,
just making sure that um
no, these are good questions. Very,
yeah,
very good.
yeah.
Yes.
There's still a lot of content level if we factor in, and all of this question was based upon now that the state has moved us away from ACT Aspire test, and now we're in our first in a long time criterion reference test,
Mhm.
Atlas or Cambium Atlas, whatever y'all may have heard that as. But when we look at that, I'm trying to use this to determine as much as possible, is the child performing on grade level? And that test will be adaptive within grade level. Y'all are adaptive outside of grade level. So,
Yes, yes.
so
So
just
the
factoring
nuance
all
that,
that in,
yeah, the
I'm
main,
trying to make sure I'm as knowledgeable about what the strengths or limitations of how to use this data is. So this is perfect for me to help these conversations. And
Mhm.
but that's a
One
great
thing I would definitely
great
suggest to you, we
question, man.
haven't had the link, we don't have the linking study yet for Arkansas because you haven't given the test yet.
That's right.
Okay. From other linking studies that I've looked at across the country. So it's really going to depend on where Arkansas sets its cut score. That's going to be of vital importance of where they decide proficiency, advanced, or basic, or any of those categories, however they decide to name them. It's going to be important to know where they are. But generally speaking, one thing that I can advise you on that is very, very true across the country, students who are in that mid category, especially at any time during the year, but especially fall, winter, when you're looking at a spring test, they have the highest probabilities of scoring proficient across the country. No matter what test, what schedule. I live in Michigan. We use the M step. And if a student uh, doesn't score mid level by the end of the year, they're in danger of not being proficient on the M step. SBA, which is a standard, and I've done some ACT and SAT tests, and still they ring true. Getting students to mid is a good goal for anyone. So if they're not in mid now, uh, and you want to change them over time, stretch growth is the only measure that I know of across the country that measures the progress toward proficiency. And it can be 2 years, it can be 3 years, and Caroline has some of our research for that if you
Yeah.
desire. So this is kind of a normative crosswalk. I'll send this to you. It'll be in a PowerPoint for you. Now these norms will be changing because of next year, but it gives you a start in on that. So, and the advantage that you're going to have with a criterion reference test in Arkansas and for ours is that these placements help you identify student needs to the chronological grade versus using a norm, which if under these old norms say you set the 25th percentile as a place for intervention, and you use the new norms next year, that 25th percentile will move probably to 30th, and you'll miss 5% of the students, but they will remain in the same placement level. It's just that the norms of the peers have changed. And it's, I know you would understand this, but it's still there. One grade level below, here's a trick that districts aren't always grabbing a hold of. And I would assume that you talented folks already have this in your head, but one grade level below doesn't mean that I need intensive interventions I do need scaffolding, but I may be early on level in one domain, 2 levels below in another, and maybe one below in another domain. So just because I'm labeled as one level below does not mean that I necessarily need a pull-out program or anything like that, but I do need some intensive work as far as scaffolding and background knowledge for the chronological grade to be successful. And so you want to make sure that's happening with your classrooms. We have tools for that. Caroline can let you know what tools. I think they're underutilized in our districts because they're excellent tools. I wish I had them when I was teaching, but they need scaffolding, but they get regular classrooms and all that sort of thing. Students who are 2 and 3 levels below, grade levels below or more, need more intensive work. And if they don't have stretch somewhere thinking through where they're accelerating their learning, and that includes one grade level below, then they're never going to reach proficiency. Typical growth overall will not help you reach proficiency or change your proficient status on your state test, no matter what goes on. It's good for accountability, but it's not a measure that says, okay, this student is on a track toward closing any achievement gap. And many times what you will find, going back to one grade level below, that is where your average student will range. Low to a little bit high average. That's where those students are. That's your average student. Those are kids that you think they're doing fine, but they're still below, and they won't get into the University of Arkansas if they keep going that way. Well, maybe ASU, but I digress. Um, I had to dig it.
I got that. I got it.
Yeah, I had to dig a little bit.
I got it.
Maybe University of Arkansas, Memphis or something. I don't know.
There
But
you go.
anyway, and they're all good schools. In fact, as an aside, I almost moved to Arkansas to work in Helena, but that was a good 20 years ago. Yeah, my first introduction to fried pickles was in Helena. Loved it. But beside that, that's kind of where you're going with these placements. They give you broad categories, and you need to look. Teachers would need to make sure they understand the diagnostic results page and the instructional grouping page. Those are two vital reports that if you don't get into any other reports that you want to use things for leveraging for learning, that's where we're at. Regardless how the Arkansas Take Test develops, those two reports will help you with that.
So one quick question that's just kind of overarching. When you look at these grade levels above and below, when you look at all the calculations behind the scenes for that, are the 4 domains weighted equally in that, or is there a more heavy emphasis on, by chance, numbers and operation and algebra domains, or is it just kind of
Okay,
equal?
I'm gonna stop you there. Remove weighting from your vernacular.
Okay.
All right. What we do, each domain is sampled approximately equally in questions.
Okay.
In math, we start off with algebra and algebraic readiness, go to numbers and operations, then geometry, and then measurement and data. When you get each one is within the algorithm. I'm going to use the term maximum likelihood estimation, which is a way of repeating measures to tell you what is the most likely scale score given the student's response to the items within that domain and within overall on the test. It's slightly nuanced from that, but that gets really highly technical and that sort of thing within our algorithm. But if you think they're weighted, you will end up going in a wrong direction. What I would look at as an educator, if I'm going to look at a domain, I would look at a domain under instructional grouping and what does that say about next steps and can-dos. Can-dos means there's a 67% likelihood that student understands that content using what I'm going to use a big word here, not trying to insult you, probabilistic nature of the test, because you can't test every item. There's no way you can test every piece of content in a test. It'd be too long. So we use the item difficulty to do things like probabilistic. So if I can add across, that means I can add down, and vice versa, depending on the difficulty. So if I present a first grader or a kindergartner with add additional problem across, and they answer it successfully, I will assume they know the easier one, which is down. And it could be vice versa. I could be screwed up here in my illustration, but I'm trying to get a point that is probabilistic. So if I was sitting in your chair, one of the things that I would make sure is that my teachers within my system are teaching on grade level material and that they're providing background knowledge for those students to any on grade level content that I am teaching within that classroom. given the placement the students are at. If I'm doing a gifted and talented, I'm making sure that I'm getting off grade level content that is sufficient difficulty, so I keep them moving. If I'm dealing with MTSS or RTI, I'm also dealing with tools that deal with background knowledge. Our personalized instruction is one tool that provides students with an asynchronous background knowledge. And the test is kind of like a comprehension check and that sort of stuff. We find good success with learning when that is consistently done with students, but it has to be consistent. And there's things that Caroline can let you know about how to measure that consistently. But that's a very good tool to use and that sort of stuff. And I'm not trying to hawk it. I'm not a salesperson. I don't care what you guys use, to be honest with you. I just want to help you understand so that you do the best that you know how to do for your students.
Yeah.
So outside of that, if it's iReady or any of our products, great. If it's not, I don't care. I've used many of other products.
That there's multiple reasons, but when I look at our struggle with pacing and we get locked in on geometry measurement and data always being paced in most cases at the end of the year, and you have K through 2 that's state monitored, and then you also just look at when your high stakes testing dates are. A lot of times we just don't get to those units of study as in depth, or even get to them as we should. And so we're working hard to fix that. But
that is a tension that happens all over. One of the things that I don't think sometimes educators get too blind in saying, well, I didn't teach this domain. But there is reading has a lot more transference than math, but math also, as you know, has some transference in it. But I don't want to give up on teaching any of those domains. They are important, but there are materials that we have to be able to help you with that or help you adjust your thing. If you ever want to think about a tough math program, ask Harry and Caroline about our IRC.
Yeah, they're big users. They're familiar. So we got lots of questions about that one, right, Arthur?
Yeah, those are some good things. I wish I had that when I was teaching. I had to make my own material and was always unsettled as to whether or not I was on pace or not. Then when I was an assessment director, I dealt a lot with Saxon math, which had its own special needs, or Chicago math, which has its own special stuff. So, and a mixture of those I used a lot. So, but yeah, weighting is not involved, but there's an overall test, and you can watch the score move. I can when I pull a test flow. I can watch that score as it adjusts through with the students' responses. Other questions? We can talk about fried dill pickles.
That's really kind of helped me a lot to know how to just know and understand those levels, those placements, consider the 25th percentile, kind of regurgitating what some of the high points were there. It's kind of a threshold, 25 to 30% for those that needing high levels of intense intervention remediation. And time is of the essence in our math classrooms. We struggle to get every minute of time that we can for core and interventions, because the curriculum and the day is very crowded. So
one thing I will add to what you were just talking about. So in your mind, there's two numbers I'd like you to write down.
Okay.
541 and a standard error from that, 535. 541 is our measure of algebra readiness. 535 is one standard error below it, which is a more inclusive, you could go two, but more inclusive measure. And the second piece that I'd like to give you is that what we have found is that all domains are important for algebra readiness. So you cannot skip geometry and measurement and data in those early grades. Yes, numbers and operations in algebra and algebraic thinking do have a larger effect on whether or not a student's numeracy at grade 3. But if they are lagging in those 2 other domains, they may never make algebra readiness. So it is important to be mid on level in all your domains to be fully algebra ready, and especially by 7th grade if you want to do algebra 1 in 8th grade, and especially by high school if you want to do algebra 1 in high school. So that is one thing that I would probably leverage, one suggestion, as to not skipping any domain information or units of study through the course of the year, because that would multiply. So they need that by 8th grade in order to do well. So there's some important pieces in there, and I'll share. That's some of our latest foundational research. It's not quite like reading, where we have found that if students are missing anything in phonemic awareness, high frequency words, phonics, what am I drawing? I'm drawing a blank on the other one. Then that would hinder them being able to be readers by 3rd grade. And so you have to make sure those foundational domains are good. But in your messaging, if you could remember that getting students to mid is ultimately my goal as an educator. And if I can't do it this year, am I setting them up to get it in another year? And that's where stretch comes in. And then you'll do the best you can. Then you will perform really well. I can almost guarantee it on the Arkansas State test, and even though you haven't taken it yet, based on what I know across the country, as long as you're getting students to mid, you'll perform well. And if you're improving toward that, you will improve on your state test. That's almost a guarantee. But the work that it takes to get there, that's the magic that your team has to work on. Is that clear, sir? Is that
That helps tremendously, and I'm so thankful this is being recorded, because we will watch this part together very soon with my elementary IF team. So that's very helpful.
good? Do you have any other questions? I want to make sure you're doing the work you need to do, not just talking to an old man in Michigan.
No, I think that's given me a lot of food for thought, and just the whole pacing and sequencing throughout the year. There's just so much curriculum that we just can't always cover it all. So we've got to just make sure that we're very purposeful on our strategies. And at the kindergarten level, that team, they've done well to pull some of the concepts and learning that's hard to get to in kindergarten into calendar math routines, and just teaching it a little bit differently, quite honestly. And when you look at their data there, of course, those domains can tend to run a little bit higher, I think, just because we see some of these applications and tasks in real life, and they're fun to learn. So, but they've done a great job there, and we probably need to pay more attention to what kindergarten's done with that, and see what we need to do at other grade levels with that. So,
now that's the hard work that you guys do that I appreciate very much. I really do. That's hard stuff. So
yeah, it is.
Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, thank you, Bob.
All right.
Good information. Thank you so much.
Good. I will send this 4-slide PowerPoint to Carolyn, and she will pass it along to you. And then how you decide to use it. Remember, it expires in the fall.
Yes.
When the new norms come through. So I'll need to get a new crosswalk at that time. So this just helps you look at it right now.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Bob and Nate. We're happy to have you on the team. You can feel free to hang on if you want to listen, but you're welcome to get on with your days. I know you guys have probably got lots of other districts to speak to, but we so appreciate you answering those questions. We had to bring in some experts for that question, and I'm so glad that we did.
You're welcome. Happy to help.